hold it about here. This is good.
Anthony, turn up the mic.
I need one of those selfie sticks to get it way out there. So anyway, well, it's great to be here, and thanks so much to Bill for the welcome. We've had a chance to work together some over the last 6 months or so to plan for yesterday, and it's really great to be here. So I thought what it might make sense to do would be we've got until 1:45, and I've been told that's the witching hour when I have to head upstairs. How about the idea if I talk for about 10, at the most 15 minutes about what Green Faith does and why we do it, sort of give a quick overview, and then have some time for some back and forth, because I think it'd be much better to hear a fair amount from you all, and those of you who were at the 8 o'clock got an earful already, so I need to sort of do a little bit of open. Does that kind of approach sound okay?
Sounds good.
All right, good. So I was a parish priest for 10 years. I grew up in New York making fun of New Jersey, and then I ended up in New Jersey back in the early 90s. I was a parish priest for 10 years, and then had a sense of calling, long story short, to transition, and was able, through a number of really, really fortunate synchronicities, to become the head of what at the time was just a small getting started organization that was called at the time Partners for Environmental Equality, and we quickly switched the name of the group to Green Faith. And back in the early 90s, very, very few groups were doing work religiously on environmental issues. There'd been some theological writing, some theological reflection, but in terms of real practical application or training or education or campaigning, it just wasn't happening. So we spent the first couple of years trying a lot of different things about you ask people in a church, what do you do to fight hunger? And immediately people have 3 or 4 ideas because they've seen it. We've been doing it for a long time. You ask the same question about the environment, people just don't know because we haven't been doing this work yet. So we developed a number of different kinds of approaches that involved, I would say, 3 broad themes. One is the theme of education and spirituality, which is, what I find, everybody has experiences of God from outdoors. And I mean everybody. And we've done research on this. Very few people talk about these experiences. And yet they are powerful. I mean, my daughter's, she's 14 now, but she used to, when she was a little girl, have these, those little sponges, you drop them in the tub and they expand into the shape of an animal. You watch people tell these stories about their experiences of God outdoors, and it is like watching people grow into their proper kind of shape and stuff. The sap rises, the spirit moves. So that's one piece of the picture. The other piece of the picture is, what does the Bible teach about this stuff? You ask most people, what does the Bible say about the environment? The first passage that comes to mind for people is the Genesis passage about God giving us dominion over the earth, and most people think that's a negative thing. So there's a lot of amazing stuff in the Bible that we're literally in real time now just learning to see, because we're in new circumstances now. And the community of faith is learning finally to read the Bible with this kind of perspective. I'll never forget, I was preaching at a church in Newark, New Jersey. And the psalm for that, I think it was either 67 or 87, I can't remember which one, but there's this wonderful little line that I had always thought of as a sort of a throwaway line. In the psalm, it's, by the side of your altar, O Lord, the sparrow builds herself a nest. Now, I don't know about Christ Church, but in most Episcopal churches I've been in, the altar guild job description does not include bird nests by the side of the altar. But here is this statement in the psalm about the altar, the place that God comes close to us. And there's a bird's nest right there. It's this beautiful image. So anyway, the first piece, sort of education and spirituality. The second piece is what the secular world called sustainability, what faith communities call stewardship. It's about how do we live? How do we use resources? And so we've done work in terms of helping religious institutions dramatically cut their energy use and their carbon footprint, facilitate financing from solar developers to try to get financing of solar arrays. We've done about 1 megawatt worth of financing projects so far. Water conservation, using less toxic substances, all this sort of stuff. And the good thing about religious institutions is that they are heavily trafficked, right? There are a lot of community groups that come through. Most people are reluctant to try out these new kinds of behaviors because they think that they're uncomfortable. They're going to make their life miserable. They sort of pull up their image of their inner Jimmy Carter huddling in a sweater in a dark room somewhere. You know? And so when people see this stuff, and they basically sort of behaviorally kick the tires, all of a sudden they realize this actually works. And the funny thing about it is, you know, we go to congregations and say, oh, this is going to cost so much. I say that we are the best news for you financially that's happened in a long time. I mean, we cut your energy use by 30%, 40%. You don't have to spend a penny to do that. I mean, come on. Most churches, the second highest fixed cost for the average house of worship in the United States after personnel is energy costs. So there's a nice energy benefit. Now, what I've found, it's interesting how sort of the human psyche works, right? Most faith communities will not take action on energy conservation if their sole motivation is money. I mean, you hear churches say that I'm here to tell you the one universal interfaith reality is that every single faith community on the face of the planet feels poor. Every single one, right? When they are or not is another question, but they all feel it. But it's interesting, even with this sort of hiding in plain sight energy savings, the financial motivation alone is not enough. There has to be a connection to the mission and ministry of the faith community to make that move. And you guys obviously are drawing those, are connecting those dots, and that needs to get celebrated in a big, big way. Because right now it's, you know, we don't yet know how to celebrate that stuff. I mean, like, you know, watch what Bill did. It was great. You know, 30 people going down to plant seeds. This stuff needs to get lifted up. There needs to be celebration of it because so much of this is about how do you, anyway, so the second piece is the behavioral stuff. And this is hard. I mean, you want to get people ticked off. You tell them they have to eat less meat. You know, it's not easy. It is not easy. I joke with friends, do you guys do a blessing of animals thing?
Yes.
Yeah. So I say to people, okay, do well, that's all right, it's good. So I say to churches, do the blessing of the animals, but then that same day do a vegetarian potluck. So you lay off eating them for one day too. You know? So, you know, try, you know, but churches again have this unique ability to try this stuff and to give people a way to take a step into some unfamiliar territory together in the midst of friends and to do some new things. It's so important. Then the third piece that we do is oriented around sort of justice concerns. Because everybody gets hurt by pollution, but, you know, no surprise, the communities that get hit the hardest, this is true in Detroit, in Michigan, in the United States, globally, the communities that get hit the hardest are the communities that are the poorest and most vulnerable racially, economically, politically, culturally, and obviously as faith communities, this is not cool. And so we do a lot of advocacy work, and we try to use religion creatively in the public sphere to sort of get inside people's heads about this stuff. So in May, in Newark, New Jersey, heavily, heavily polluted city, we're doing a blessing of 100 electric vehicles. Because we want to send, we're getting about 40 urban pastors together to bless these things. Because 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and God knows how much of the air pollution in New Jersey, is from vehicles. Right? We're from New Jersey. We drive everywhere. Turnpike, right? So, you know, but I mean, this is a huge issue. And we try to use religion in a creative, public way, an artistic way, to sort of, you know, to say, this is the right thing to do. At the climate negotiations this past November in Bonn, the UN climate negotiations, we have a sustainable lifestyles campaign that we're helping run. So we did an official statement from 200 religious leaders around the world. We figured, how are we going to deliver this thing? So it was just awesome. We worked with some people from Greenpeace. We got the main street in Bonn closed off. We rented 75 bicycles. And we had people in traditional religious clothing bicycling down the main street of Bonn to deliver this statement. I mean, the media can't resist it. And I obviously think it's a good way to use religion publicly, to send a message about this stuff, to inject some playfulness into it, and at the same time to make a serious point. So we divide our work up into those, those are the three themes, the sort of education and spirituality, the lifestyle stuff, and then the public advocacy and activism work. And as you can tell, I have a lot of fun doing it. I think that, I say to a lot of clergy colleagues, this is not the only evangelism strategy for faith communities at this point in history, but it darn well sure is one of them, because I know that people are, we know that people get, especially, it's fascinating in the evangelical church. Evangelicals, broadly speaking, over the age of 55, the two top social issues are abortion and gay marriage. Under the age of 35, it is hunger, poverty, and environmental care. And then in the middle is what people call the swing evangelicals, and those are the ones, frankly, we got to move in the right direction quickly because a lot is riding on it. So, we do leadership training. We have a green certification program for congregations. We're working with seminaries to try to get it inside the head of seminarians that they've got to be up to speed on this stuff and caring about it and connecting it up. We do mobilization work. I tell you, if you haven't been to one of these big climate change marches, just go to one of them. They are so much fun. I mean, it is like, and I mean, this is the Episcopalian in me, it is like a big, grand public procession. It's like walking into church for 4 miles. I mean, it is just a lot of fun to be out there and to see the range of people who are there and to stand up and to sort of take a stand for this stuff. And what we see over and over and over again, I said this in the sermon at 8 o'clock, politicians, they're good people, many of them, but they do not lead. They follow. And if we want to change, and this isn't just true on the environment, it's true on all these issues. If we want our leadership to do the right thing, then we need to create the conditions where they feel they've got little to no choice. And that's what's happened in ways that, that I won't get into the other side of the picture, but you know what I mean? I mean, this is for real. And I think that the environment offers an opportunity to revitalize our faith communities, our society, because I think it's an Irish saying about, is this a private fight or can anybody get involved? I mean, this is everybody. This is everybody on the face of the planet. I mean, we're doing work now in a number of in 5 rainforest countries around the world where, I mean, I'm here to tell you, it is devastating. I mean, indigenous peoples who live in these forests, protect them, I mean, they're getting shot in broad daylight because companies are going in, they want the timber, they want the oil, they want the minerals,
And grazing ground for more McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so, and so one of the things we're trying to figure is, can we find a way to get faith communities in these countries that the second an indigenous person gets threatened, that there's a faith community that steps up and has a sort of a buddy system, and the faith community says, we're watching out for this person or this family. I mean, I don't know if that's going to work or not, but it's trying to figure out how do we help turn the tide, because there is enough to go around, and there are good new technologies, and we are going to need transitional investments from companies, from governments, from everybody to help make the transition so that we can live on this earth in a sustainable way. Because the alternative is really lousy. I mean, a couple of days ago, the New York Times did a thing about what does the world look like with 100 feet of sea level rise or something like that. I mean, it's, put it this way, I'm underwater. New Jersey's 80% gone. And we did some work with some monks in Thailand, and the Thai government, Bangkok's 17 million people, they think they can build a wall around that? I mean, it's just not going to happen. But it's like the stages of grief. You watch entities go through this process of thinking about how they're going to deal with this. At first they deny it, right? Or they try to, it's sort of there, but it's like, no. Then they go into truly creative denial, which is we're going to build a wall. Then they get angry about it. I mean, it's all these stages, but we've got to, you get my drift. So let's open up, I've ranted now for long enough. So how is this for you guys? I know you guys are doing stuff already, which is great. We would love to partner with you. We're starting now this process of organizing what we call Green Faith Circles in different places around the world, because 10 years ago you talked about this and people looked at you as if you had 3 eyes and 18 fingers. Nowadays, it's, I knew we were making progress when a friend of mine who's a priest said to me the other day, we're not doing anything about the environment. I feel guilty about that. It's like, yay for guilt, we got people feeling like they ought to do something. So faith groups do so much of their good work locally that, you know, we're looking at creating these green faith circles, a little bit like the idea of what does the local Habitat for Humanity chapter do? What does the local, you know, Interfaith Hospitality Network do, where you've got local people coming together, identifying what are the issues they've got to solve, and working together to do that. And that was what was so cool about the conference yesterday, is from an organizer's perspective, this is like a gold mine. I mean, you've got 40 congregations there that have to do something, like it or not, and they're eager to get involved. They're articulate in terms of understanding the issues. I mean, it's like a gold mine for this stuff in terms of building momentum to help them address the stormwater stuff, and then to build some power from there to be able to help, you know, Detroit become a real model and a light to the nations, you know? Anyway, yes ma'am?
Let me,
You want to pass around?
yes.
Great.
I hear you
Great, great.
speak, and it reminds me of my youth when I took the train that started in Princeton, stopped in Rahway for Merck and Company and all the scientists, stopped in Newark, and then went to my spiritual home in New York City in Penn Station. And I hear your voice and I'm home again because there's the accent.
And my parents tried so hard to have me not have a New York, New Jersey accent.
Yeah, it's not.
I didn't notice he had an accent. That just says a lot.
Anyway, I applaud what you are doing so much. But I also, I immediately thought when you said you're blessing electric vehicles. Electricity takes a great deal of juice, a great deal of energy from us. And far better in terms of our footprints, carbon footprints. But are we thinking about blessing the trains that are coming in new? You know, I don't see many new trains, although when they went east recently I did in the New Haven route, you know. I just wonder if we can be extreme, or do we stay little? It's a start.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. We're trying like crazy to get an electric bus manufacturer to bring an electric bus so that we can blend. And it was really fun. About 10 years ago, the Evangelical Environmental Network did a campaign called "What Would Jesus Drive?" which was really fun. It was right when hybrid cars were starting to come out, and they had an evangelical pastor drive through the Bible Belt, and it was just so. I always thought, you know, Jesus would have taken public transit, right? I mean, that was so.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and I'm so happy to be moving to Ann Arbor, where on the corner I can take a bus downtown, and it's free if I'm U of M.
Well, yes.
So I read this morning a piece by Vox, VOX, about Earth Day, what's changed from last Earth Day to this Earth Day, and the number one thing that has changed is plastics. So the number of plastics that is in the ocean, this is extraordinary to me, by 2050 will exceed the number of fish. And so I didn't even know plastics were being dumped in the ocean, and so there was conversation about landfills and everything like that. So I like the idea that you were saying be local. So what are your thoughts about faith communities, individuals who believe in their own private residential lives and plastic?
I mean, this totally gets from preaching and meddling, right? I mean, so I'm just going to say that up front. I mean, I think that, you know, it is my job and it is my calling to say that I think we've got to talk to people about their personal consumption habits. I have to be, I mean, I fly a lot. That's not cool. You know, I try to balance, you know, what does it mean to fly and to, you know, so we buy carbon offsets, which is good, but it's not, so I think this stuff has to be on the table. And again, I think this is where faith communities are indispensable, because what doesn't work, we know what doesn't work, is to sort of, you know, shake a finger at someone and say, you can't do that ever again, or you're a lousy, you know, schmuck. You know, that doesn't work. what works is you have to talk about, usually people use things, they do things because of convenience. With travel, people do things because they're visiting people they love, or because they're going on vacation, or because they have to for work. No, none of those are all legitimate things. It's not easy to work with that. With plastic, you have to talk about alternatives. Or there are biodegradable alternatives that are increasingly available, and that are a little bit more expensive, but but I think to start and to sustain the conversation on all of these things is just really important, and to celebrate the successes when that. I think the environmental movement, we're part of it in our own way, but one of the problems with the environmental movement is that it excels at having an apocalyptic narrative, but it's not so good at having sort of the narrative either of celebrating incremental steps forward, which you have to do, or of painting what's the positive vision. So I think that the brief answer is we have to talk about this stuff. Our lifestyles need to be on the table. I think the good news about that is very often, when you start to deal with this lifestyle stuff, what I find, you look at all the studies, and believe it or not, those of us with all these things here in the United States are not necessarily so happy. And there's enough research out there now that is very clear that after certain fundamental needs are taken care of, a lot of people's happiness is determined much more by quality of relationships, by meaningful work, by a measure of convenience. But I think it's. So I think that there's some interesting opportunities for churches to talk about what is it that really makes us happy. Because people often, if you talk about lifestyle, people immediately think you're trying to make them unhappy. And that's ridiculous, because what that means is that we've already kind of reified the idea that, that consumption equals happiness. And I'm here to tell us all, we work with a lot of different religions, and they are, we don't take the lowest common denominator, everybody's the same approach to religious diversity, because there are real, genuine, interesting, fascinating differences. But I have not yet found a religion that says that the purpose of life is to consume as much as you can. That's generally speaking not a religious thing. It's about relationship, it's about community, it's about vocation, it's about service, it's about being a decent person. And everybody knows that we need to have some material good. Anyway.
So one of the things, though, I find there's a kind of structure to the discourse around the environment that happens, which is that similar to what you just said about scolding people can't affect change, is we tend to build up, and we start to build up all the things that we're doing. We make it into this huge, huge problem that eventually disempowers everybody. Like, no one can do anything. So we just have there's just this big boil of worry, and then we just ignore it and hope it goes away. And we go so what I was really intrigued by in your sermon, and I don't mean to bleed that in, but hopefully some of you will stay and some of you have heard, is you mentioned that there's an intervention happening in this fall that's going to be a march about climate. Where you're asking, you thought, what would happen if we had our youth do an art project for that? And then among the many priorities, we've got plastics, we have the climate, we have other things. What is the one thing that faith communities are joining together to do productively?
So, I definitely get what you're saying in terms of the sort of the huge heap of worry. What I have found is that you mentioned in the announcement time the number of outdoor bulbs that you guys have replaced. That would be the sort of thing where it would be relatively doable to quantify what are the energy savings and how many trees is that. And to publicize that as part of it, so that there's a celebration of here's some good stuff that we're doing. Let's start. So I think to start to frame things in that kind of way is important. So that's one thing, is to celebrate more. Second thing is to I think becoming part of the sort of social movement structure around this. I mean, we're a very active part, as you know, Bill, of a group called the People's Climate Movement, which has organized these big mobilizations. And what's been really fun about it is that it is environmental groups, student groups, labor unions, faith groups, indigenous peoples groups, and racial justice groups, and so what's been fascinating about it is that you're meeting all these people with different perspectives. They're not all liberal white environmentalists, which is a relief, and it's just it's just interesting because it's made me, for instance, start to think about I think that we've got to have an end to new fossil fuel infrastructure, but if I'm in partnership with colleagues in the labor movement. And they're saying, well, what are we going to do about these jobs? What are we going to do about these displaced workers? That, to me, is interesting. I mean, it adds another dimension to the conversation. So I think that's, I think being part of the social movement structure around it is really, really interesting and helps shift the way in which things happen. And in terms of ways, and we see faith groups coming together around that. I mean, there are more and more, not all, but there are a lot. The other thing that we have found through the Green Faith Circle organizing that we've done is that once people start to get together locally and they start to identify what it is they want to work on and they start to become friends with each other, and they're connected on a Skype call or on a video call with people doing stuff in other places around the country and around the world, it just feels cool. I mean, it's like coming to church. It just is, they're part of a fellowship that's working together on this. So I think that it's tricky because the problems are really severe. And at the same point in time, that's never stopped faith groups. I mean, hunger's been pretty severe a problem for a long time, and that's never stopped faith groups from digging in. So I think part of it is really, as we develop more confidence that we know how to engage, I think that helps mitigate some of the overwhelming feeling or the overwhelmed feeling. But it takes some work. I mean, it takes some work. Yes, sir.
I'm really excited by your pointing out, number one, that this is not just education about the metric tons of plastic floating around in the Pacific, and yes, that is important, but theological education. And this has only begun to turn over in my mind in the last 10 years. People far younger than I pretty understandably dismiss most churches because, like it or not, we are so lofty and disembodied in what we talk about. We've even managed to take the concept of the incarnation of God and turn that into yet another unincarnate concept. I don't think I've ever heard from a pulpit, which is not to blame clergy for not mentioning this particular fact, because we do hear about the incarnation. But if it's true that the power that spun the galaxies into being became human, that means he relied on the oxygen in his lungs and in his blood. His bones were made up of the minerals that form the mountains. His flesh was a result of the carbon from the plants and the occasional animal that he ate. He really, truly is not only the source of the environment, but oddly enough, a product of it. What would happen if we really meditated on that for a while?
We need to get you on video. This is good. No, I mean, I've always so the Catholic Church, with some of its Catholic social teaching documents, take Jesus' words of institution, where he takes bread and wine. And then, what is bread? Bread is the fruit of the earth and the fruit of human labor. Same thing with wine. And Catholic social teaching has said that is an ultimate dignification of labor. And that's why workers need to be respected and given decent working conditions, decent wages, because Jesus dignified labor, by saying, this is my body. My feeling is the same thing goes for the earth. I mean, these are the words of institution. Bread is not just labor. It is the fruit of the earth also. So I think there are a lot of ways religiously and theologically Now, I'm going to say something, and again, this is the sort of thing that's very easy for a visiting preacher to say. So years ago in Thailand, a lot of deforestation going on. There were Buddhist monks in remote rural areas that were educating their butts off to try to educate people. Like, you cut the trees down, the soil goes, everybody's impoverished within 10 years. And they were getting next to nowhere with this sort of very well-developed rational approach. So one day, a couple of junior monks schlepped out into the forest, and they took the saffron robes, the saffron cloth that Buddhist monks are robed in, and they went and they ordained a tree. And what they found was that the loggers, and that Buddhism is 97% of Thailand is Buddhist, so it's an integral part of the culture. What they found, the loggers did not feel good about cutting that tree. It just did not feel right. It was way beyond rational. They just did not feel good about it. And so the monks weren't stupid. They started ordaining other trees too. And what it did was it started to put pressure, and the government felt it because the government didn't want unrest, and it eventually was an important part of, along with lots of other contributing factors, towards leading to the establishment of a reforestation policy. So my feeling is, and I haven't yet done this, but I've talked about it for long enough that I'm just going to have to go do it, is I think that certain people that get picked out for this work have to go around, and I don't know what we do. Do we start baptizing trees? I guarantee you it would get attention. I guarantee you we would not work with evangelical churches after that. They wouldn't want to work with us. And the Catholic Church. I mean, these are the kinds of things that go through your head. But a big part of the power of our faith, as we all know, is that it is deep. It has the ability to speak to us at the absolute deepest level of right and wrong, what's good, what's sacred. And throughout history, faith leaders have used that power rightly in the service of changes that need to happen in society. I think we're at one of those points. 2 minutes? All right, who wants the last word?
Oh,
We've got you, but let me see if anybody else who hasn't had a chance to say anything wants. Anybody else would like to say anything? Last word.
I have a necklace that somebody looked at and said, "Oh, is that the tree of life?" Not this one.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "If you want it to be." Because it looked, it had that look. And I began to think about that in terms of tree huggers that I saw in Central Park, who would come up and hug a tree. And the person with me went, "Watch out for that one." And I thought that, there is something to our maybe not worship, but certainly reverence.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That we could pass along somehow, even if it meant going out and hugging trees.
Yeah, no, I think there's no question. So the phrase tree hugger came originally from back in the 800s, 900s, in a part of India. There was a region that had a spiritual leader who recognized that if you cut down the trees, that the soil went to hell and everything bad happened. So this region particularly was known because it had a religious injunction about not cutting down mature trees. Huge trees, so a nearby king hears about the huge trees and wants to get some of them to build himself a nice big palace. So he sends emissaries over and says, "Can we have some of your trees?" No. Sends his army over, and the people would not do it. So the people, led by the women of the village, encircled the trees. They hugged the trees, and the army wouldn't kill them. So that's where tree hugger comes from. And what's fascinating is, recent thing, at the same time that the monks in Thailand were going on, a group of activists in India, religious activists in India, picked up on the tree hugging thing to try to stop deforestation. So it's very interesting how there are, whether explicitly or implicitly, there are some pretty deep religious roots with a lot of this stuff. So thank you so very much for the chance to have a little bit of a conversation. And thank you for it's really wonderful to be here with you all, and I hope very much we can continue to do some work together. And thank you for all of the good work that you do. Thank you.